But I believe we have Mr. Webb with us on the program now. David, how you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good, buddy. It's a Friday night. Always good to be here.
Yes, well, one good turn deserves another. You had me on the Andrew Wilkow show earlier today talking Fast and Furious, and when I saw this story about how Bloomberg and the city getting ready to crack down on those smokers who have figured out a way to buy a pack of cigarettes for less than $15, I knew that I wanted to talk with you about it because it's so indicative of the nanny mentality here. The city decided, they wanted to crack down on public smoking, and I guess private smoking as well. So they raised the taxes on cigarettes. Now you're paying between $11 and $15 a pack. And in response, the market has found a solution. You've got a number of businesses, and it sounds like more are perhaps on the way, who have set up shop. They're selling loose tobacco, where the taxes are a lot cheaper, and rolling papers, and they have rolling machines, and you can go and you can basically roll your own, and you can walk out with a pack of cigarettes for less than $4, albeit you're putting in some elbow grease to get the cigarettes for that price. City doesn't like that. Mayor Bloomberg doesn't like that, and now they're talking about doing something to either shut them down or try to raise the taxes so that these stores may in fact go out of business.
Yeah, and I mean, this goes beyond the nanny state because there's a little bit of crony capitalism at play here. You talk about the taxes that the city collects. That's revenue. They don't want to mess with their revenue. On top of that, big tobacco, is after I did some checking on this, they've been putting a little pressure on the cities. And this is not just New York. We're talking about New York and Nanny Bloomberg, as I like to call them. But they don't want to see their revenue start going down if this takes off.
Well, no, absolutely. And so the city's actually filed suit, I guess, against Island Smokes, which is the name of the store.
Right.
They say they see numerous tobacco manufacturing, sales, and tax regulation violations. But here's the kicker. They say the roll-your-own shops hinder the city's efforts to get people to quit smoking. And they filed a federal lawsuit against Island Smokes in an effort to shut them down and collect the back taxes. A lawyer for the city says no one would claim that IKEA is not selling furniture just because the clients have to assemble that. It sounds to me, based on what the laws are currently, that the taxes on loose tobacco are what they are. The taxes on manufactured cigarettes are what they are, and the city doesn't like the fact that a company has figured out a way to provide a product to a customer because they don't like the product.
Yeah, and on top of that, where's the government's role in telling you should or shouldn't use a legally available product just because they don't like the delivery method, which is also legal? So we've got the nanny state. We've got the city that wants to use the arm and weight of government on private citizens doing what is legal. That's the key here. There's no prohibition they're violating.
Right.
On top of that, we talk about a cigarette, and, I'm with you. At $15 a pack, if there isn't a reason to quit, $15 a pack is it. And I never started, so I never had that problem. But on top of that, Cam, here we have a situation where this tobacco is, it's just a little bit cleaner than all the toxins and chemicals and enhancers and different things that they haven't found their way through in a cigarette.
Right.
So if you want to call it that, this is the healthier smoke.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would, and
I
I
wouldn't
say
call
that as
it
somebody
healthy,
who's,
but it's the healthier. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, not quite as bad for you. Maybe it only takes 6 minutes off your life rather than 7.
Right.
But interestingly, though, I keep going back to this idea. It's the sin tax. That we don't like a behavior, so we're going to regulate it and try to prohibit it by making it cost too much. This story from the New York area says anti-smoking groups say that prohibitively high tobacco taxes are an effective deterrent and have proven successful in Australia and the United Kingdom. Here's the thing. If we're going to keep going down this road, then when does Michelle Obama declare that we need a cereal tax on Captain Crunch and other breakfast cereals that kids like because she believes they have too much sugar in it? So we're going to start a $4 a box Cookie Crisp tax.
Well, this is where we go back to the arm and weight of government determining what we do. Look, government has a role, but they are clearly not interested, especially in New York City, in staying within those lines, Cam. I mean, they want to tell us that, and, as, by the way, a consumer of a once prohibited substance, sitting right here in front of me now,
yeah,
they want to tell us that we should go that way forcibly or not at all. And, you mentioned that smoking has gone down in certain countries, and a lot of things have happened here. They don't do empirical studies that show why it goes down. The fact is that a lot of people today don't smoke out of choice. They just have grown up. We've advanced the available knowledge and the available information on what smoking does to you. And if you choose to do it, go ahead. It's legal. It's not for me. It's good if you want to choose it. But a lot of people just simply aren't as interested in smoking these days.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's right. And again, I would say part of that is because of the the PR the anti-smoking campaigns. Certainly, the sin tax probably does have an effect, as you say. If in the city of New York, by the way, they get $5.85 from every pack of cigarettes that is sold. So they're getting more in taxes than what cigarettes are selling for actually here in Virginia. That is going to have an impact. But as you say, is this something? It's a really fine line to walk. In fact, I don't know that I think there's even much of a line to walk here. If you think the product is so bad, you know what? Work to ban it. Now, again, we know how well that worked with prohibiting alcohol back in the early days of the 20th century. But if that's what you want to do, go ahead and try to make it an illegal product. When you try to pressure folks, and again, David, have we not heard all of this talk of economic inequality? Where are the occupiers marching on Mayor Bloomberg, demanding their right to a cheaper smoke?
Well, and if you go to that route, when you look at the cost and the smoke and the rates of smoking amongst lower-income Americans, where it's a higher percentage, well, now you're hitting them. So hang on a second. You don't have enough money to spend. You're one of the lower-income groups that occupy Wall Street and all the left wants to protect. So you won't let them have a cheaper smoke, so maybe they have a few more shekels in their pocket to go buy something like food. But again, I did some checking on this. I mean, when I was at Eric that emailed me today while we were in the show, and I decided to call a couple friends and check with them. And the minute I talked to a few well-known sources or known to me anyway, not well-known, or they'd be in a lot of trouble, they said, we've already got pressure coming from tobacco concerns, from the government. So when you combine those two, crony capitalism and nanny state mentality, you go right to the heart of liberals. They don't believe that unless they control something and can tax it and can take a city that's in serious trouble financially, that's just spent over $20 million probably on Occupy Wall Street alone in excess costs for police, fire, sanitation, etc. They were already in trouble, and now they're starting to see the potential for loss of another tax base. If this takes off, I see this popping up in hipster areas in Brooklyn and all around the Bronx, all around Manhattan. I mean, this is American entrepreneurship. You want to compete, lower the price of cigarettes.
Right. Well, but again, it's not about competition.
No, it's not.
Prohibition by another name. And I wonder, David, do you see a time when New Yorkers get fed up? I mean, again, maybe it's not going to be with smoking. Apparently, a survey shows only 14% of New Yorkers now smoke. But we're now in Bloomberg's third term. We've seen the war on smoking. We've seen the war on salt. We've seen the war on trans fat. We've seen the war on gun owners out both inside New York City and outside of New York City. We have seen this constant attempt by Bloomberg to regulate and manage the lives of New Yorkers, the individual decisions that they make on a daily basis. At some point, do they get fed up?
And part of the problem you just stated is there's only, in the case of cigarettes, 14% of New Yorkers in a city of millions. So the larger population doesn't pay attention. They are already fed up. I'm telling you, from people on the streets of New York, they've had it with Mayor Bloomberg. and they really reached a boiling point when he played around with this Occupy Wall Street mess. Because instead of taking care of the business of the people that he's supposed to serve, he just backed off, just like the president, absent leadership. He wants to tell you what to do, and then he wants hands off when he doesn't really want to deal with it and have a backlash publicly. This guy is going to leave office with a bad legacy, and there's going to be a lot of people looking at the next mayor, and they're going to look at him from the point of view of, if you start to even try one thing, we're going to come out against you.
Interesting. I mean, I guess it's good that they've reached this decision. It's too bad it's taken 3 terms of Mayor Bloomberg to get there.
Right, right.
But
the hubris that he showed by not taking it to the people of New York and, frankly, giving them the choice of whether he should have a 3rd term or not, that started his slide. And the ego, the billionaire ego that he has, is more interested in his legacy and his ideology mixed with that than anything else, it seems.
Right. Yeah, let me ask you another question about Bloomberg, David. I don't know if you saw this, but CBS in New York had a story yesterday. They asked Bloomberg what he thought about Operation Fast and Furious and whether or not Eric Holder should resign. And he said, in essence, he said, I don't like to dwell on the past. He said, it's up to the president if the president wants Holder to resign. I mean, he did not want to talk about Operation Fast and Furious. Now, if you are the head of a group called Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and you say you're not anti-Second Amendment, but you are opposed to criminals having firearms, why would you not be screaming bloody murder about Operation Fast and Furious?
Well, maybe he's now joined the mayors for illegal guns. Because unless you're against Fast and Furious and what's happened and those that need to be held accountable, and you and I think, actually made this little back and forth, probably months ago, where are the mayors for illegal guns? Well, they're all the people who will not push to have this, one, prosecuted if necessary, people fired or impeached. This goes back again to that liberal encampment in a lot of ways, Cam, where as long as we stick together, we cannot pay attention to the things we don't want to see. It's okay. That's just in the past. Nobody got killed. There's not a dead, border guard. There are not over 300 dead Mexican citizens and still guns out there running around being used. That's just in the past. We'll just pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah, you're right. And the sad thing is, actually, it's not sad. I'm actually glad that Bloomberg has decided that, he's not going to talk about Fast and Furious, because it really does expose his agenda in his organization for exactly what it is. It's never been about getting guns out of the hands of criminals. We do have laws on the books for that. We can prosecute these guys. We can avoid giving them sweetheart plea deals, and we can put them away for a long period of time. His goal and his objective has always been to go after the legal gun owner, and that's why he doesn't care about Fast and Furious. It's why he's not incensed. He doesn't want to talk about it because, you know what, it actually hinders his objective. It gets in the way of trying to make the case that we need more laws to go after the law-abiding gun owners because, people look at Fast and Furious and say, look, you can have any law on the books, but if the government's going to let these guns end up in the hands of the cartel members, new law's not going to help you.
Yeah, and by the way, you can't make laws for people who, by their very nature, are not going to follow those laws. And on top of that, Cam, remember, wasn't this the very same mayor who worked to have a team of undercover investigators at gun shows?
Yes.
His agenda?
Yes, it was, as a matter of fact, going to other states and trying to conduct these sting operations. And, there have been a number of states that have actually decided they've passed laws preventing Bloomberg from doing things like this again, because when he sent his little PIs across the country to try to do this, apparently interfered with a number of law enforcement investigations. He never alerted state police in the states where he went in, never tried to work with local law enforcement. Actually, now that I think about it, very similar to Fast and Furious and not alerting the Mexican law enforcement that the guns were going south of the border. So maybe, David, you and I have figured out another reason why Mayor Bloomberg really isn't all that opposed to Fast and Furious. He's kind of engaged in similar tactics himself, only PIs, not guns.
Right. using it to further his agenda. And by the way, think of what he does to his very own officers when he sends them out to do this. You know, most police officers and agencies cooperate with each other. They have a respect and they have an understanding. So he's putting his people in a very difficult position. I know a lot of these guys in the NYPD, and I can't speak for every one of them, but I wouldn't be too sure about saying that all these guys are like, let's go out and bust people in other states and not talk to my buddy in that district.
Right. So, David, you know, where do you see Fast and Furious going? I mean, I know we were talking about this earlier today, and I want to thank you for having me on. But where do you see this story going from here on out?
Right now, I look at the political component, which has to play out. And as you talked about today, we come down to a deadline. I believe you said it was February.
A deadline for what?
For Holder to provide information or to answer Congress.
We don't have a deadline, but Holder, the February date, Holder has decided that he's not going to turn over any information after February the 4th. In other words, all of the documents and emails that have been floating around from earlier this year as Justice was trying to figure out how to respond to Fast and Furious, as they were talking about Fast and Furious, Holder says, you guys aren't going to get any of that. ISA has not given him a date to comply, but he did say if you don't comply, we've got a hearing coming up in January. And he said if you don't comply, the next step is contempt of Congress. So we could see that very early on in the new year.
Well, and if that component plays out, I see a bigger move for impeachment. I think that process also plays out, and if in that process they discover perjury, clear perjury, then we could see a prosecution potential. But I think the political component has to play through, and ISA and certainly Grassley, a number of others that are really on top of this issue politically, they will continue to push Holder. And the president is he does not want to go through a nomination battle to replace Holder. And it's his close friend, his confidant, and all the above. He does not want to go through that. So he would have to be pushed significantly to go to Holder and say resign, or otherwise I'm still of the thought process that Lanny Brewer or somebody else takes a hard fall for this.
I think you're right about that. I don't think I don't think Obama wants to see any top deputies go. I mean, again, once you get to that point where Holder's gone or Lanny Brewer goes, maybe a Jason Weinstein could get thrown under the bus and you wouldn't, gather too much press coverage. But if the head of the criminal division resigns over Operation Fast and Furious, I'd like to think, knock on wood, that I can't even say that would be a front page story in the New York Times or the Washington Post. I mean, they would probably still bury that on page, A12 or A13.
Well, they've pretty much. I mean, the sin of omission, of media omission on this, and I make it quite clear, and I really credit you, Cam. You stayed out in front of this thing. I mean, I talk about it as I follow it, and for the Patriot audience on Saturdays. So does Andrew and others. But you have stayed, man. You have been on target.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate that. I mean, it's just, it's one of these stories that deserves to be covered. It's a legitimate story. How the administration has responded is a legitimate story. We still have the family of Brian Terry who are looking for answers, and they're not getting them from their government. So to me, it's a very compelling story, and we are going to keep following this until, and I don't know where the story ends up. I don't know how it turns out, but we're going to be with it every step of the way. David, what do you have coming up on the show tomorrow?
Well, we've been talking about insider trading, and we've got various versions of the Stock Act in Congress. Well, IBM hired the hackers when they were being hacked back in the 80s and 90s as computers were really being developed. So I went to Jack Abramoff and sat down with him, because if we're going to break open and name the names and really expose what's going on in Congress on both sides of this aisle, where they use this private information to make public trades and enrich themselves, then we need the guys that have played the system and gamed the system. And Jack Abramoff has agreed that we will continue to work through 2012, and as we do this, Cam, names are going to come out. People are going to be outed for what they're doing. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. This is wrong, and it's time it's really laid bare.
All right. David Webb, thanks again, sir, for coming on the program. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great show tomorrow, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Cam.
All right. David Webb from Tea Party 365 and host of the David Webb Show right here on SiriusXM Patriot 125.